Ladies and gentlemen, Herald
Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Kia ora, Emily. How are you, mate?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. How's your week gone?
Good, great. Having a great week, great day.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's great.
Now, is there any kind of activity happening on the computer behind you after the show tonight?
Yes, I did hear about the awkward blinking light that people were freaking out about. No, there is not a bomb going off behind me.
Very good. Lovely to have you back. Chewy's got some, I think he's travelling north at the moment, his partner's birthday, and I think they're going to Christchurch to do some stuff with her brother, I think. So they're having whānau time, which is lovely. And we're kind of having whānau time too, just a different kind of whānau time. Tonight, guys, on the show, we are going to be having a look at a really sad story out of Auckland, Dave Letele's food bank shutting down. It's heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to watch it on the news as well. You could see it was really an emotional thing for him because he's had obviously this heart for this community, and when you stop and pull away, what happens to that community you've been helping provide for? It's just such a sad story. Also from this morning, quite a small conversation when it comes to time-wise with Chris Bishop and Ginny Anderson. They did talk about the opening of the books today, which we're going to talk to Craig Renney about in just a sec, but also they talked about what National's currently doing when they're looking at transgender inclusion in local sport. Now, to me, it's a bit of a non-story because it's not like we're not talking about transgender inclusion in Olympic sport. It's not a big controversial worldwide. It's like community sport. It's like Kurau has a local soccer team that go and they compete against, Nelson on a social sport kind of level. So I don't know why there needs to be any changes to that, but yay, Winston Peters and the people who got him voted in, perhaps. So we'll do that as well. I've also got a bunch of things that I've kind of found over the last couple of days, little bits and pieces that I want to share with you through the show as well. In fact, I will share one with you now before we go to Craig Renney, because this might be a little bit indicative of what's going on with the government at the moment as well. I got contacted by someone in the last 24 hours who has something to do with, to keep it as generic as possible, Te Whatu Ora. And there's a part of Te Whatu Ora, I'm not saying every hospital, but there's a part of Te Whatu Ora that has been told that there is going to be a 3-week mandatory leave period across Christmas, New Year's. And if you don't have, I'll read it from the email, which is on my Twitter if you want to see it, where team members do not have sufficient accrued annual leave, the base expectation for leave without pay to be taken. So I'm not saying this is the whole of every hospital is not going to shut down for the New Year's period, but there's a section within Te Whatu Ora, and I think it might just be within an Auckland part. I'm going to be a bit more generic so I don't necessarily identify 100% what's going on. That they're being told you got to take leave, and the reason I think that this is unusual was the person who sent this to me said, "What's going on here? Why is this being enforced?" Which says to me it's not the usual practice, because people on Twitter have been saying things like, well, businesses do that all the time. They make you take your leave over Christmas. That's when they shut down. It's like, yeah, but this is not the standard practice. And one of the most ironic bits about it, Emily, was I'll read it from the email. It does talk about essential works, emergency maintenance, H&S, whatever that is, and permitting,
health and safety.
Health and safety, and to quote, and it says, this is a quote, to keep the lights on. Now, that sounds like you say that when it's a financial thing, but because it's maintenance, maybe it's literally to keep the lights on. I don't know. But however it's been written, there is the staff from this area who are now being told you have to take leave now. Obviously, they don't usually have to take leave. And if you don't have enough leave accrued, then you have to go on unpaid leave during this 3-week period. which sounds harsh. And if you're asking about it, I do have the details there. You can see there. That's a photocopy of the email that went out. That's on my Twitter feed. You can go check it out.
There's no mention of maintenance. It's just kind of
essential works, emergency maintenance, health and safety, and permitting to, quote, keep the lights on. Where team members do not have sufficient accrued annual leave, the base expectation is for leave without pay to be taken. I know businesses do that, and it does talk about the thing like a business, right? And it's for Te Whatu Ora, Health New Zealand, which I don't think we consider a business, but the email's got anyway. More on that, and I've actually said in the message on Twitter, if anyone knows more about this, let us know, because we'd like to tell people. So we'll be having a bit of a chat about that. Also, I don't know if you follow this account, Stray Dog NZ Nick has done a brilliant thread of all the times that Christopher Luxon claims to be unaware of his coalition government controversies. All the times he said, I haven't seen that, or I'm not aware of that. And it's a long thread, far longer than 10 months of being a Prime Minister should warrant. But we'll have a bit of a squiz through that. And also, I'm going to get you all watching on YouTube right now to subscribe to a new YouTube channel. We've heard of Mountain Tui, does really good work, does writings, has a YouTube channel. I'm going to show you something from the YouTube channel tonight. And everyone on YouTube is going to go subscribe to Mountain Tui, because they've only got like 177 subscribers at the moment, and they need more. So when we get to that point, it'll be like, yes, you can like this episode, but also go and subscribe to Mountain Tui. We'll get that out there as well. Alrighty, mighty. Let us get in Craig, and let us have a look at what this conversation is around this coalition government spending more than it pledged. From the CTU, Economist Craig Renney. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
How you doing? Doing well?
I'm good. It's been a big day here. You know, it's the third most important day of the year after the two budget statements. Obviously, my son's birthday, obviously being number one on that list. He said rapidly rescuing that particular sentence. It's been a really big day, and it's been a really interesting day here in Wellington to actually find out what's really going on with the government accounts, because these are the audited accounts. So these are actually what's really happened, rather than our guesses at any one point in time.
Cool. Let me introduce you to Emily as well. She's someone who's doing some stuff with us. Emily is part of the whānau. So here's what we'll do, because one of the questions is, what the hell is today all about? You've kind of already answered that. Let's have a look at the story off One News, and then let's have a talk to what is actually going on, what we need to know, etc., etc. So this is from One News tonight. All right, to other news now. And despite the promises, the coalition government is spending more than it pledged. That's the takeaway after the government's books were opened. The finance minister admitted it's sobering reading. The books remain in the red, with the country's deficit now almost $13 billion. Revenue is up, but it's not enough to close the gap. Debt has gone up by nearly $20 billion to $175 billion, taking it to 42.5% of GDP. I was actually thinking as we go through, Craig, should we stop and do you want to just speak to these as we're going through? So it's gone up by, how much did it say, another $45 billion?
So debt went up by $20 billion.
Right.
Debt has risen to 40, as it is in the graphic, 42.5% of GDP. Now that sounds like a lot of money, and it is. However, if we were having this same conversation in the UK, that figure would be 100%.
Wow. So their debt is 100% of their GDP? Correct.
If we were having this conversation in the US, the debt figure would be somewhere in the order of 125, 130% GDP.
Yeah.
If we're having a conversation in Japan, that debt figure would be 270% GDP. So it's very much a case of it's high by New Zealand standards, or it's higher by New Zealand standards, but New Zealand standards are very, very low. We don't have a debt crisis in New Zealand. We have lots of other crises. We have a crisis of investment, we have a crisis of infrastructure, a crisis of confidence in this government, but we don't have a public debt crisis. There's no suggestion that our debt problems are any issue at all.
Yeah. Okay. So answer me this then. We're at 42.5% of GDP. You're saying that's a pretty good result. What are some countries that are a better result than us? Are there many that are also like 40%, 30%, 35%, 20%?
No, I mean, even Australia has a higher debt to GDP ratio than us. The countries that tend to have lower debt to GDP ratios are countries which have historically had, like Switzerland. That there are some countries that have very low debt to GDP ratios because in the past they've been burned by debt, and so they make a thing of reducing debt to GDP ratios. Then there are some jurisdictions that have very low debt to GDP ratios. I'm sort of thinking here, Niger, Chad, Sudan, which have lower debt to GDP ratios simply because nobody will lend them any money.
Yeah, right.
So it's a real it's a real mixed bag. But New Zealand's debt is absolutely no problem, and that's reflected in the fact that during COVID, the Crown's credit rating went up. We're one of the only countries in the world where people were more keen to lend to us during COVID than anywhere else in the world.
Hang on. So we got better. Gee, thanks, Jacinda. Isn't that what we're supposed to say at the end of that? Something like that?
Yeah. We're one of the few countries in the world that was the case. Yeah.
Speaking of that, though, $20 billion debt, more debt under this government. My understanding is under John Key's government, debt went up by approximately 50 billion. Under Labor, approximately 25 billion, far less than under John Key, funnily enough. But Labor seems to get the lion's share of them the country being put into debt by a certain sector. And these guys are already taken up by 20 billion. So that means they're at a similar level to what Labor did in their full term with COVID. Is that correct-ish?
Well, so Nicola, or Miss Willis rather, would say that some of these accounts reflect the first few months or the last few months of Labour government. So she would say that not the full year for her. To be frank, it's good practice amongst economists when we're talking about debt, particularly public debt, to actually not talk about the nominal figure, so the 175 or the 150 billion, because it's actually a fairly meaningless figure. You should always concentrate on the debt to GDP figure. And again, our debt to GDP isn't a big issue. It rose last year, didn't rise a huge amount, and there's still a huge amount of headroom should we need to borrow more money in case of a natural disaster or something else.
It actually, when you say it's pretty good. When you say comparing to, say, for example, our counterparts, the Americas, the Australias, the UKs, it's pretty fucking awesome, to be honest.
Yep. So if you compare ourselves to countries like Canada, where that figure will be much higher, it's 60-odd%. If you compare yourself to the UK, to the US, it's higher in Germany, which has had a historically stronger economy for a really long period of time. If we're having this conversation in Italy, it will be somewhere in the order of 150, 160%
wow.
GDP. It's actually more important who you owe the money to, rather than actually the amount of money. Because if you owe the money to well, we generally speaking owe the money to international money markets, which is generally speaking big Australian banks, because they're wrapped up in investment portfolios. We owe some money in euro markets and some money in Japan, but not enormous amounts. Italy has a very high debt to GDP ratio, but most of its debt is owed to Italians. So it basically owes it to itself. It's a much more stable form of debt than if all of your debt is owned by foreigners and they demand that debt in their own currency. All New Zealand debt is denominated in its own currency, and so therefore we're not likely to default on our debt.
I love it that we've played 25 seconds of the video and we've spoken for 5 minutes so far. That feels very BHN. Emily, do you want to ask anything from your worldview at the moment? Me and Emily had a bit of a chat before and she goes like, oh, the economy is not my strong suit, but lots of people, economy is not what they understand. Is there anything from your perspective that we're going to keep going with the video as well, but that you want to ask of Craig?
I think you've answered most of the questions that I had, and the things I was looking up was trying to figure out what the whole debt ratio thing is, or what it actually looks like, that 42%, and then looking at other countries and seeing how high it is. What would you start to freak out about? Like if you saw it jump up to 20% in a year, would that freak you out, or what's scary? It's
what are you spending it on?
Yeah.
So if it rose 20% in a year because there was a natural disaster, or because we suddenly had a global pandemic, or because we suddenly had to, find money to pay for social services in that place overnight, you'd buy that. That's not a problem. It's if you spend it and you don't have anything for it, you don't get anything for it, that's when it becomes a real problem.
All right, let's keep going with this story. See if we can get past 30-second mark before we stop it again and start talking.
The government says the figures justify the cuts it's made, but as business correspondent Katie Bradford reports, those affected by the cuts disagree.
In Porirua and in Warkworth, groups that help the most vulnerable are reeling after learning their Oranga Tamariki funding will be slashed.
Very surprised and very disappointed. People come to the parenting course because they want to. They want to become better parents, and we've even got grandparents who are parenting their grandchild or children.
A lot of the work we're doing is preventative mental health work and even moderate mental health work, and the rug's been pulled out from under all of those people.
So they'll have to find money elsewhere.
We're competing with an awful lot of people at the moment, and everybody knows that charities at the moment are really struggling.
What it really means is that families and young people who need support don't get the support that they need.
We will look at this a bit later on as well, because we talked a bit about the Gumboot Friday last night, and a bunch of these charities seem to be struggling. I don't know if literally these charities, but there are a bunch of charities out there now who seem to be struggling based on what looks like Nationals, Labour bad, political movement to just commit $24 million to one group before due process is even solved. So we're seeing that in some sectors. Whether it's this sector or not, I'm not sure, but a bit later on tonight we might have another a re-look at that as well, Emily. We'll keep going. Here comes the English graduate.
Will these programs help the victims of the government's cost-cutting drive?
What the books today tell us is it's now a time for very careful choices.
Those books make for grim reading for a government that promised to cut spending. Treasury's tally shows spending up 11% and revenue up 9%. Soaring costs at ACC and Health NZ make up a large part of the uptick in spending.
We need to impose restraint to ensure that the government and the country is living within its means.
Unemployment is expected to keep rising, the Finance Minister admitting that could hurt the government's future tax take and increase welfare costs.
You have asked government departments to make cuts that have led to some of those job losses. Therefore, some of that extra money that will cost the system does come down to your decisions.
No, I don't accept that because...
Of course I don't. Craig, do you accept that out of interest?
Yes. But it's just maths. You lay off 7,000 workers or so, or at least you stop the employment of 7,000 people. Some of those will be vacancies, but you lay off 7,000 people, you're going to be increasing the number of people who claim unemployment benefit, the number of people who claim accommodation supplement, the number of people who need assistance in other ways. Unemployment has already risen 47,000 this year. So at least part of that is the Crown. It's also partly the Crown because it's stopped other government programs. Those have flow-on effects for other employees in particular areas. They've stopped investments in infrastructure, be it the IREX program, be it Dunedin Hospital. Again, that's flow-on effects in terms of infrastructure and employment. So by definition, some of the government's decisions will be leading to higher unemployment right now, and what seems likely is higher unemployment in the future.
I believe they said revenue's up 9%, but expenditure's up 11%. Now, when I think about that from, bit of a moron's point of view, I think about tax cuts and landlords as well. Because if they didn't give that away, revenue would be up even higher. And it feels like what these guys are doing, to coin a phrase, that they've bought the Ferrari, right? And then they've done their sums and realised there's nothing left to pay for the groceries in the house. And they've gone, look, we just don't have enough money for groceries. And you're going, but you bought a Ferrari. And they're like, well, we've got no groceries, no money left for groceries. So we got to cut ourselves down a bit more because we don't have enough money for groceries whilst they've got a Ferrari sitting in the driveway. It feels like that a bit to do with the tax cuts and the landlords. It's like, but you're short of money, but you gave 17 billion away. No, the budget at the moment, is that a fair way to think? Well, not fair as in yay fair, but am I being fair describing it like that?
I think perhaps we might describe it in economics as it's about choices. And the government's making choices to not fund things. The government's making choices to not do things. And it doesn't need to make that choice. If I give you a silly example, if we were to spend an extra $10 million and it would lead to happiness breaking out across Aotearoa, to sun shining, birds singing, everyone being happy, would you spend that money? Of course.
Yeah.
But if you set a debt limit and that $10 million was just above that debt limit, would you still spend that money? Yes, of course you would. You'd be mad not to. You've got an artificial debt limit. What we're finding here is that the government has set itself a fiscal strategy, but it hasn't thought through the consequences of all of the cuts that it's then delivering. So it's going to achieve its fiscal strategy, come what may. It's going to achieve the numbers it wants to achieve, but it doesn't mind the losses on the way through, or it hasn't thought through the losses on the way through. In essence, it knows the cost of everything, but it doesn't know the value of the things.
And some may like to debate, maybe they have thought it through, and maybe there's a plan for things falling over, and maybe they've got someone in one of those back rooms that no longer has working, just waiting to come to the front room to take over some of these places where the losses are happening. And I mean, you know, you put someone in charge of the health system who has a record in private healthcare, just maybe they do know, Craig. Maybe they're completely aware of what they're doing. Maybe it's a part of their plan.
Well, I think one of the things I would say is that if there is a plan, they're delivering it very badly, because debt's continuing to rise, spending is continuing to rise, and if their plan is to reduce those things so that they've got more space in future, or to make services so bad that they then look to privatize them, they look to move them into the private sector, then what's happening right now is you've got 35,000 people on the streets of your good city telling them to get lost.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a foretaste of what's likely to happen if we see much more of a push in that particular direction.
All right, let's try and get to the end of this article. I'll try and hold my tongue for the rest of the video.
Extra money that will cost the system does come down to your decisions.
No, I don't accept that, because there's two things going on there. The first is no government can continue to live beyond its means indefinitely. And the second is that what we're concerned about is the number of...
Oh, it's very hard for me not to stop this video. I want to keep talking, but I'm going to do my best.
...jobs and the economy as a whole.
Labor says it shows the coalition's tax cuts were unaffordable.
New Zealanders will continue to pay the price for those tax cuts well into the future, and it means that New Zealanders should be bracing for more public sector cuts, more public service cuts.
Nicola Willis says it's all about priorities.
If you cut the funds to organisations working with our most vulnerable people in our communities, it's a weird thing to do.
It's hard to see any rationale.
The government says it's the plan it promised and the plan it's sticking to.
And Katie, you've just had some...
That'll be the wrap up for that one. Emily, I've talked a lot. Anything you want to jump in with now, and any questions you've got?
Well, actually, I was thinking about your analogy of buying a Ferrari, and I was thinking about it before. It's a little bit different because they've basically cut their revenue stream by giving back money to cut the taxes they would usually get from landlords and from people, right? So they've cut their revenue. So it would be actually more like you've reduced your hours at work for whatever reason, and then you've gone, I don't have enough money, so I'm going to borrow it instead. Is that kind of a better analogy, Craig?
Well, certainly the Crown's reduced its revenue. Now, it's fair to say the cuts in the revenue only start in April this year, because that's when tax cuts started to bleed through. And so actually only a small part of the tax cuts have actually come through in this set of accounts. The next set of accounts, the next year's accounts, will show the really big falls in revenue as a consequence of the tax cuts. What this also shows is that some of the revenue we thought was going to turn up hasn't turned up, and that's because the economy isn't doing so well. So corporate tax fell 5%. We spent 17% more this year on unemployment benefits than we did last year. We spent 8% overall on more benefits than we did last year. So we're seeing the impacts of that slowdown in the economy. We're seeing the impacts of fewer people spending any money. GST receipts rose 4.1%. Great. But actually, that's less than the inflation during the majority of that period of time. So again, it suggests that there's a really slow economy. Things aren't going so well. And the reason those things are important is because the accounts are telling us there's no engine of growth. The government isn't investing. We see net investment fall every year for the forecast period in the government's accounts. The private sector isn't investing, it's not growing. We're seeing unemployment rise. So consumers aren't going to be investing. So where is this magic growth going to come from, which will create the tax, which will create the revenue that we need to deliver the public services? We can't keep cutting our way to try and find, so you end up in this vicious spiral of cut, things get worse, so you cut, so things get worse, so you cut.
Yeah.
Instead, you actually need to do what has been textbook economics for 70, 80 years, which is when the economy is in a state, when things aren't going so well, the Crown intervenes because it's got much deeper pockets to reduce the impacts of that fall, to make sure people stay in work, so that when the recovery does turn up, you get a much better recovery rather than much deeper scarring that occurs if you leave it alone. And that's been the experience in the country that I'm from, the UK, where post the GFC, we did exactly that. We went for austerity, we cut public services left, right, and centre, and it took a decade to get out of that mistake. I don't want to see us repeat that mistake here. We really need to change our approach to how we're dealing with the current crisis, which on a GDP per capita basis is actually worse than the GFC rate.
Nicola Willis said in that conversation, quote, "What the books today tell us," end quote. I'm interested because what they're doing a little bit is going, "Oh my God, have you seen the books? They're so bad." But they had pre-fu, then they had a budget, and now the books are opened again. Are they really? Is this now a little bit like they're going to go, maybe this will be the last time we can say blame Labor because the next budget's all us? Because it feels like, they've written out all these checks all year, and then they've flipped back through the stubs on their old checkbook. I'm a very old person, people watching, and going, "Oh my God, look how much I've spent." Like they seem surprised, but shouldn't they pretty much know what the books are going to tell them today?
Well, we have fantastically open books in New Zealand. We're amongst the best place in the world in terms of the transparency of our public accounts. Again, if this was the UK, we could only dream of the level of transparency and that New Zealand has. Huge, overwhelming volumes of information about public expenditure. So none of this should be a surprise. And interestingly, if we go back to the accounts that were forecast in September last year, just before the election, the result that we have now is pretty much the result that was forecast in September.
Right.
So despite all the claims of cutting back, being more sensible, and managing prudently, books are what they were predicted to be before we even had a change in government. So there doesn't seem to have been a huge amount of change what's going on. I just want to tell you one thing, Pat, just to give you just slightly depress you.
Thanks.
That's why I'm Economist. I was born in 1979 in the UK, and the first election I could vote in was 1997. That saw Tony Blair being elected. That entire 18-year period was under a Conservative government.
Mm-hmm.
6 months before the election that elected Tony Blair, the Conservative government was still blaming the Labour government of 1979 for the protest at that point. So I don't think any government's ever going to turn around and not use the previous government as an excuse for what it needs to do.
I think we need to put something in writing. You've got 12 months, not a second longer. Awesome. Thanks for coming on tonight, Craig. Emily, is there anything you want to ask before we wrap up?
Just a quick question on the prediction. Was that prediction based on the government at the time, or was it sort of a prediction on what National said they were going to do?
No, based upon the government of the time.
So it's based on what they're currently spending.
It was based so that the forecast in September of last year was based upon the settings of the previous Labour government, and that's actually what's come to pass. Instead, the new national government came in and said it was going to make things better, but actually things are pretty much as forecast way back in September. Now, one thing I would say is this: is that these are all backwards-looking issues. Right, we're all looking back and saying what happened. The key challenge is actually what's in front of us. What can we do? And we have lots of choices about what we can do. We've got huge infrastructure investment opportunities in front of us that we could choose to make, and we have the debt ceiling to deliver them. We could choose to tackle child poverty and to put food in schools, and we could choose to, take away the tax credits that we're giving for tobacco. We could choose to actually make investments in the country so that we're all better off, so we don't have a health service that's going to be forced to save 7% of its budget just this year so that it can balance its books. We could do all of those things, and those things are in the future, right? Instead, we look likely, and the Minister of Finance committed to this in the speech today, to cut every year from this point forward so that they can deliver on their targets. So what we've seen to date is just a foretaste of what's to come over the next few years. But the good thing is, other choices are possible. This thing isn't inevitable. It's not like coastal erosion. It's not just going to happen. We can choose to do things differently, right? And I say this most times I come on here, so forgive me, Pat. We have 720 days, roughly speaking, until the next election. We've got to spend every single day telling the public that not only there is a better future, that actually it's possible and preferable.
Thanks for coming on. That last bit of that question that Emily just asked, what I'm actually hearing you saying is this government has done nothing to impact where we're going, better or worse. So all the people that thought that this government was going to come along and change everything, you didn't get that. And the whole bloviating about we're going to do it so much better, the economy is doing exactly what was predicted to do. So they've literally made zero impact, other than to people's, like big picture, they've made zero impact. Down on the base level, lots of people are hurting more because of the austerity they're going through. But you're saying they could have made other choices and still been in the same place as well.
Well, if we look at the US, for example, inflation in the US is 2.2%. It's putting on record numbers of jobs. Its economy is growing at a real clip. It's got challenges, don't get me wrong. There are plenty of places that really struggle, right? But it's doing so much better than New Zealand. And the reason it's doing that, the Inflation Reduction Act, which invested trillions of dollars in new US infrastructure, a government that's being active in supporting labour markets. This is the US, not New Zealand, the home of hyper-capitalism, and it's doing so much better because it's doing the things actually we're taking away. And that's the real lesson for us, is actually, if we didn't take those things away, our recession is going to be more protracted and more difficult to get out of than it needs to be, and will be in those countries that do the things like the US, like the UK is starting to do, that we're actually going to see better outcomes there. But those choices are still in front of us. We could still choose to do that. We've just got to choose to do something different.
Kia ora, Craig, for being with us. Lots of people want to say kia ora, Craig. I really appreciate your clarity. That's from Ian. Bill says, Craig Renney is a champion. It's about making the right choices for all citizens, not just some. That's from Bill. And I think you've kind of already answered this, but there is one question in particular, which I'm trying to now find, which I can. There it is. Question for Craig: has our economy stagnated? Which is, I think you've kind of already answered that, but just in 30 seconds or less for Kiwi Bird.
Yes. Hello, Kiwi Bird. Yes is the honest answer. The Reserve Bank forecasts the economy sort of basically not doing a great deal for the next few quarters. We don't see growth return. We might see a little bit more growth returning with the interest rates falling quite so quickly, but for many people, they're not going to feel that growth. So we see economic growth, but it doesn't actually make any difference to you, me, or other people on the street. And that's the real challenge. How can we deliver growth that puts more money in workers' pockets and actually makes them feel better off and make them feel more secure? And it's a different show to talk about how we do that.
As always, Craig, thank you for being available. We love having you on. The next time you come on, I want to see you in a T-shirt. I just get the sense that, you got to the end of your work day, you got out of your work clothes, and then you put them back on to come and talk to us. That's the sense I get. I could be wrong. So next time, a T-shirt and yeah, just saying, just putting it out there.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Craig Renney from the CTU, economist and legendary human being. Emily, that was your first interaction with Craig. Any thoughts? He's pretty amazing, eh?
Oh, he's great. I love listening to his voice. It makes me feel calm about the world, even though he's saying really depressing things.
I'd like to be depressing for you for a second here, Pat. Whilst he's telling us the world is going to hell in a handbasket.
The world's going to end, but it's okay. We have choices the government's not making.
I tell you what, one of the things about there, which I'm going to clip and use as a hook, is that we are in no different place under this national government than we would have been. In fact, this national government could have made different decisions, not the austerity decisions that they've made, not the cuts that they've made, and fewer people would be unemployed and would still be in the same place because the predictions have panned out. I just think that's damning. That's a damning thing to be in, because obviously the predictions when Labour was in aren't based on all the cutbacks and stuff. That wasn't based on that. It was just based on how the economy was going. So that is damning.
Yeah.
Some super chats. We'll get to a few of them. Frosty just says early fee $2. Thank you, Frosty. Keybird again. Keep the government out of amateur sports. Yep, we're going to get to that a bit later on. Frosty again. Hold on. Wait a minute now. I thought national was better for the economy. Look, you guys need to go back and find the episode where we showed you in America how of the 7 presidents, the top 5 on the economy are Democrats, or 5 out of the top 7, I should say, are Democrats. You know, it's like, this is a lie. This is a lie of the right, and we need to figure out how to educate more people on it. I love Kenny's Dead's logo there. Sobering reading as national are drunk in charge. Yeah, I get that. Peter says 2 ways of seeing the ratio drop: repay debt and or increase GDP using the capital to invest in the country would be better than austerity. Yeah, it seems to make sense. Cameron just chucked us $3.50. Thanks, dude. Appreciate that. No message there, just hi. Hi, Cameron. Tawhiri, thank you for the super chat. Debt, 20 billion. Tax cuts for landlords, 2.9 billion. Luxon's word salad, priceless. For everything else, there's MasterCard. No, sorry, cross that out and we'll go Labour bad. Very good. You'll get used to Tawhiri. He's our pun king, Emily. Many are good. They do. Some people do say that the pun is the lowest form of comedy. Tawhiri will have you believe otherwise. They're just
it's smart. It's clever.
Chef's kiss. Luke says, where is the opposition on the what on the COC is doing? Yeah, I guess it's hard because it's really the media's job to put that out there, but also in this new world of social media and independent media, I mean, you know, you can get your message out to hundreds of thousands of people going around the outside of mainstream media these days. So I don't hear a lot of noise either, but I don't know, maybe all of those political parties are still sort of leaning on heritage media where they can be doing their own thing. I mean, the Greens have got hundreds of thousands of followers. They can just get it out there themselves. Spend money to make money. Am I right? Says Brian Turner. Thank you for the super chat. Bud Call Forward. It's lies, money and targets. Screw the people. And Gold says, how do we convince the coalition that their fixation on their targets is actively harmful to the country? Well, again, they may not need to be convinced. They may know that this could be a plan. Free Soul says Craig needs to come speak at the Labour Party conference. Labour Party conference, I believe, was in Christchurch in November. I've had a little thought, Emily, that maybe if it is there, that maybe I should talk to it. Maybe I'll drop Kieran a wee text. And maybe we should go up there and do a show from the conference.
I would love to meet him. I'd love to see him as Prime Minister.
I'm thinking about that.
I mean, no one who's not Prime Minister, and when you've got someone that's in charge, you're not going to say, oh, I'd love to be Prime Minister, because that never shows confidence in your current leader. But I reckon someone's put him forward. He's clearly more media than doing more media than a lot of them. So we'll see. See what happens.
I've just put in Labour Party Conference 2024, and it's given me the UK one. Bloody Bing. I don't use Bing. I use thing. Conference, December. Friday 29th to Sunday 1st December, so it's the end of November, and it's in Christchurch. Yeah, I'm right. So maybe we'll have a little chat about that to Chewy, and maybe we'll do a road trip, come up and do a Saturday night show for the conference or something. That could be cool as. Kind of cool. Okay, let us go to. Actually, we'll do this story. This is a really sad story. It's sort of indicative of what's going on in the economy today. But after this story, I'll show you some gold. I'm not going to say it's going to make it all okay again, but I'll show you some gold that'll make you smile. This is Dave Letele. He is a legend, especially around South Auckland. he's a boxer, the brown butterbean they called him, and he's been running food banks, I think, since COVID. There was a story earlier this year where he basically came out and spoke against, maybe the wrong word, but was pretty pissed with John Key. I think he felt like maybe John Key sort of used him a bit before the election and, you know, gave him his phone number. John Key? Sorry, Christopher Luxon. What am I talking about? I get those two mixed up all the time. And then he kind of ignored him and left him. And I'm not saying it's the final straw in this hat, but it's now ended up that the work that Dave has done needs to all stop. He's run out of money. He's run out of headspace to do it. It's a really sad day. Let's have a look at the story.
The man behind Brown Butterbean Motivation is closing down his South Auckland food bank. Dave Letele's charity has been a crucial lifeline for struggling families, but he says government funding isn't enough and it's taking too big an emotional toll on him to fundraise the shortfall. Yvonne Tahana reports.
Dave Letele's never been afraid of a fight, but the battle to feed our most needy
I just feel
is
for
now
him.
too big.
You know, I mean, it's been so I try, you know, I try not to think about it just because it's, you know, it's emotional. It affects my family. It affects my mental health. You know, and then now I've got to think about the families that we're letting down.
Announcing today he's shutting down his South Auckland food bank.
This is terrible news for many of the struggling families in Auckland, particularly South Auckland, but also sad for Dave Letele. This guy has a big heart.
His food bank started the day before lockdown after learning of a mum of four with no money or food. This year his organisation received $87,000 in government funding and Letele fundraises the rest. He needs $1 million a year.
We done an impact lab report that showed a $13 return for every $1 invested in us. And I show this to every government bureaucrat that comes to see us. But still we can't get any support.
So this is the tie-in we were going to do to the Gumboot Friday. Now, I've seen quite a few reports today that haven't spoken that highly of the investment into Gumboot Friday, talking about the return on investment. Whereas when you've got these guys, for every dollar they put in, they get $13 of value. When you hear a government kind of going, you know, KPIs and the best money for your bang for your buck, and we're going to treat every dollar like it was your own. We're not going to be an ATM. This seems to be a place that fulfills all those criteria. So if there's not the ability to do it, it's heartbreaking, Emily, when you see him.
And it's only $1 million. $1 million, that's it. And you just saw billions in debt. 175 billion versus 1 million. That's insane.
And let's say it again. I know we say this a lot, but we're going to keep saying this until the next election. $2.9 billion to landlords. So you could have $2.8999 billion to landlords, and $1 million to, I might have got that 9 wrong, by the way, probably did. You know what I'm saying? $1 million less than 2.9 billion, and continuing to help feed. And the thing is, with this austerity government, these guys and girls, this government is making life worse for these people. And not only is it making life worse for these people, the people trying to help these people are struggling to do it. We're hearing about these places shutting down all the time. Dave Letele is quite high profile, you know, so he gets his story told like this, but we're hearing about other places. So these guys, this coalition of cruelty is screwing over the most vulnerable, and it appears that they are stopping people looking after the most vulnerable to look after the most vulnerable. So it's just, it's harsh always round. Let's get through to the end of this.
Prime Minister says the government's given $175,000 to the charity.
First and foremost is the government is working really hard to get our economic house in order, so that actually that's how we help people through a cost of living crisis.
In Otara, the ASA Foundation runs a food bank service. Its trustees say the closure couldn't have come at a worse time.
Getting close to Christmas and also the end of school year. Many of the families that depend on his service and help are going to really feel it.
It receives no taxpayer funding. Dave Letele says the funding model's broken.
It's just so hard.
And from Christmas, one less charity at the table. Yvonne Tahana, One News.
Heartbreaking, like just heartbreaking. People doing the right thing, helping the most vulnerable, still not able to help the most vulnerable. I want to put up a tweet. And we had Dr. Gary Payinda on last night talking about some issues to do with the government getting rid of chief medical officers, frontline workers, and they're going to get rid of them. And I just saw this from Gary's Twitter today. Now, this is to do with Gumboot Friday and to do with some of the controversies, not necessarily around their funding, but about how they operate. Because since that story came out yesterday about them getting that big amount of funding and it being inconsistent and unusual is the quote, and the appearance of it looking like a bit of a, stuff you Labour from the National Party making a promise pre-election with no oversight whatsoever, and then they had to do it, right? So there's lots of things going on there. This is what Gary wrote today. And I'm reading this specifically because we've just heard about a charity that for every $1 investment, they get $13 worth of value. So that's the reason for reading this. It's worth a minute reading to stuff and other public sources, legitimate concerns among them. This is about Gumboot Friday. Oh, sorry, we should read this one here because this is from this is what he's responding to. Mike King's charity is providing these services for a fraction of what the government does. The government spends millions to copy the tracking system I Am Hope uses for monitoring appointments regionally. Then it goes on. And this is his response to it. It's worth a minute reading stuff and other public sources, legitimate concerns among them, how they use unqualified counsellors, provide few sessions, don't count the professionals' costs, education, training, while government does, making Gumboot Friday look vastly more cost-effective than it is. How they had to change the title of their lead clinician because they weren't appropriately qualified. How they handled a donation, conflict of interest, and officially assumed a political role. And how they have very high administration and travel expenses with only half of every dollar going towards actual counselling. I'm going to keep reading that, but just to be blunt, that would imply that the $24 million of taxpayers' money given to them, $12 million got spent on counselling. And now think again about what Dave Letele said. For every dollar that they get $13 worth of value. That means if you had given, I'm now going to try and do maths in my head, 24 million to them, 240 plus, 24, about 300. It's about 300 million worth of value. You know, just looking at the KPIs, Mr. Luxon, looking at best bang for your buck, looking at all these business ideas. Gary goes on, it's not reassuring reading. Then you add in the government's shady process prior to giving them 24 million of taxpayer money, which has just been independently assessed and found to be questionable and lack proper oversight. A real funded, trained and professional public mental health service is what's needed. And that's what's been underfunded or in one case defunded, then refunded when word got out. No one is against ad hoc services popping up, but not if it takes away taxpayer money from actual essential public mental health services. So there you go. Your thoughts, Emily?
I would love to know what 24 million into the public service would do. Because it's not like we couldn't put that in. I mean, charities are great. They fill in a lot of holes. But if you're going to give 24 million to them and then not also boost the public sector in this case, why not just give the 24 million to the professionals in the health sector and give it to them instead and see what they can do with it?
I think the answer, in my opinion, to that is this was Luxon going, fuck you, Labour. Like, that's what it was.
Because he was the one that gave them the 24 million. It was his government that gave them 24 million.
Yeah, so prior to the election, they'd missed some marks on funding, like Gumboot Friday from the Ministry of Health, not from Labour, but you know what everyone says. And that's because they didn't tick all the boxes. So basically their application, their administration, that kind of stuff wasn't on. So of course, Mike King, who I have respect for from his position as a comedian and stuff, you know, he's been around for a while. He got in front of the cameras and he made a big fuss about it and he talked about how, you know, this government wasn't funding them and yada, yada, yada. So Luxon pops up and says, we'll fund you. It was, all it was a fuck you, Labour. And it's a bit like when they said that they were going to fund the 5 cancer drugs. And they'd done no process or looking into that. And then when they got into government, they had to go and fund, I think it's 49 drugs, because the 49th drug on the list was one of the 5 they'd promised. So they make this, I'm not saying cancer drugs are a bullshit promise, but this bullshit promise when I'm saying they haven't done due process before the election, and then they have to fulfill it after the election, and they look like absolute goose eggs doing it. Like, it's great that we've got these 49 new drugs. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, it's
but the
great.
only
I think
reason
it's
we got
benefited me too. It's great.
100%, it's great, right? But the reason that they had to do that was because they made this silly promise pre-election with no research. In my opinion, it's the same for Gumboot Friday. Because then after the election, when they gave them the $24 million, there was no oversight, there was no due process, because that took such a big pool of money out of that sector. Other ones missed out. And then after they did that, they went, oh, maybe we should check to see if everything's in place. And it wasn't. Now, let me make this clear. I'm not making any accusations towards Gumboot Friday. I don't know of their inner workings. But I know I used to support groups like Tear Fund and World Vision a lot. And I know that between 85 and 92 cents per dollar that they got went to the, to the child or to the village or whatever. So 50 cents in the dollar is a really low fee for a charity to get through to the end product. That means $12 million goes on basically administration wages, travel, offices. That's a big chunk out of that, a big chunk. No accusations being made, but it's from knowing people who work for Tear Fund and stuff, that's a small percentage of your dollar given, or our dollar, government's dollar given, that gets to the end user. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Got some more chats that have come in.
I think it's just sad that we're losing something that's clearly very, that's working and is needed. Yeah. And makes such a great impact.
Yeah. Apparently I'm whispering. Stop whispering, Pat. You're too quiet. Emily's much louder, so I can't adjust my volume to get you both
I
right.
turned myself down a little bit, but maybe I could do more.
Should
I just yell?
As well.
I turn myself.
We'll see what they do. Kiwi Birthday. Oh, thank you for that, Kiwi. Okay, why do you keep doing super chats when you're giving us information, Kiwi Spirit? Just message us. Email me. Chin Up Letele, you did well for your community. Yeah, you're right. But isn't it so sad? I mean, you could see that he was heartbroken. He was gutted. He had to stop. And it seemed to be heavier on him based on his community, which makes complete sense. Another Kiwi Skirt. Also, does Emily have any socials for people to follow her on, please? Oh, Kiwi Skirt wants to put all your stuff around the place.
I'm an enigma.
Enigma. There you go.
I don't know what that means.
Kiwi Skirt again. This one's just because I know you hate it when I do super chats. Yeah, there you go. So, $2 gang from Mr. Arvids. And again from Mr. Arvids, charities pop up to fill the gap on public services. They shouldn't have to exist. They should just fund public service properly. I agree with you.
I have a few things on that, actually, because I used to work for charity. Well, kind of still do. I do contract work for them. They actually some of them fill a really unique hole that almost government can't do. There is a place for charities. They definitely fill the holes that are missing because either the government will or won't fund them, but also there is a place for them because they are independent. And ideally a charity works best when they're not governed by contracts given to them by the government, but when they're able to work in partnership and are not reliant on government funding. That's when you get the best results out of it. But yeah, there is a place for charities. They shouldn't have to exist in some cases, but especially when there's sort of political divide about what to do in some certain areas, especially in justice, then charities do a lot of really good work. So they shouldn't have to exist, but sometimes there is a place for them.
I think this is going to sound a little bit from the Western world, certainly talking hundreds of years of history of Western world, the place that charities fill up today was the place that perhaps the church did in years gone by, looking after the widows and orphans, that kind of stuff. And as all societies have become more non-religious, charities have stepped up more and more and more. And I'm not suggesting that the churches should be doing it, but I think if a charity is doing a job that in 2021 could or should be getting done by a government public service, then that charity should have easy access to the money that public service would have cost. I think that's it. Or else the public service should do it. I mean, I guess the other thing is there's never a perfect public service. You know, people fall through the cracks and that sort of thing. So maybe there's always going to be a place for, you know, quite bespoke, quite niche charities that drive into a, you know, in business they talk about going narrow and going deep, you know, sell one product and sell it well. So maybe they're always going to be around like that as well.
Yeah.
All right. Here's something else for you guys. This is a bit of a light-hearted thing. Everyone, right now we have 697 people watching us across all the platforms that we're on. If you are on YouTube, I would like you, and I've seen Kiwi Skirt put it in the chat there a few times, to go and follow Mountain Tui, because Mountain Tui does some great work, and Mountain Tui currently has 177 subscribers. We could easily get that to 500 off this video. So go and subscribe to Mountain Tui, and tell them BHN sent you. And if you're thinking, oh, maybe not, well, let me give you a little bit of Mountain Tui experience as to the kind of the content they put out.
You are making some choices about what to spend money on, and it's all kinds of other stuff. It's roads, it's tobacco tax cuts, it's stuff for landlords. And when it comes to something that Kiwis fundamentally care about, which is health,
I disagree. We put almost $30 billion a year into health. We put $16 or $17 billion extra in, the most spent ever going into health. So there's plenty of money in health.
So what I have to do now, Emily, just to explain to you and to others, is we do have audio podcasters that listen. So I will read out the text, not because I need to be involved, but just because people who are listening to the audio podcast won't be able to read this. And this video, by the way, is called NZPM Chris Luxon, I'm wealthy and I'm sorted. And the text says, what Luxon is not telling you. Lowest health spend per capita in a century. Health spend plus 2.9%, inflation plus 3.3%, population increase plus 2.6%, net increase insufficient. I'm not reading that. Lowest health funding in New Zealand. If it walks like austerity and talks like austerity, it's austerity. Headline from Social Issues. On Dunedin Hospital.
Well, we've got a lot to do in terms of building out that infrastructure. Hospital infrastructure is a part of that. We've also got good money coming in, but you just can't have a project go from 1.2 billion. When it started, can't have it heading out to $3 billion. And even at 1.9, it'll be amongst one of the most expensive hospitals.
The $3 billion figure includes out-of-scope items and has been debunked. That's true. Some of those out-of-scope items included refurbishing the old hospital, which is gone, a car park, and like a lab, a place that they, like Southern Labs currently do that as a private entity. And then there's more conversations here. Radich called the reporter smokescreen. He's the mayor of Dunedin on debt. This is what he said.
How are you going to get us out of the structural deficit?
Well, I just say we have to get out of the structural deficit. We've been on a massive binge and we have to have a little bit of a diet to get the books back in order.
The government ignored advice not to borrow $12 billion more for tax cuts. New Zealand's government and net debt is still one of the lowest in the OECD, as we just heard. The government is spending big on landlords, roads, private schools, tobacco companies, trusts. On working from home.
Are you surprised by the level of resistance to sending the public servants back to work?
No, not really. But
you were expecting this?
Yeah. I mean, I get it. People may not like it, but the point is that's what's going to happen.
When are you going to give me my minimum days they have to be back? That's what I want.
Yeah. Well, we want the starting point needs to be you're in the office, and then if you have formal arrangements, that's formally agreed. It's not an entitlement.
So are you saying to me right now it's 5 days in the office unless you've got some permission not to be there?
Yep, correct.
Premier House.
Moved into Premier House yet?
Moved in on the weekend.
Is
finally.
It cold?
Well...
God, be honest. I mean, it's drafty and ancient.
Well, we finally managed to get new paint, new curtains and new carpet. That's what the work has been.
I'd like to remind people that Jacinda Ardern lived in that house with a newborn child for 5.5 years and found it just fine. But old Lux wasn't good enough for her.
Those three things aren't even going to stop.
Part of the house.
Say again, Emily?
Those three things aren't even going to stop the drafts.
Yeah, true.
It was last time when Jim Bolger was there in 1990.
Yes.
So the carpet had been stretched, I think, 7 times, pretty threadbare, but we managed to get that approved to get that spent.
And are you cold?
I've got a nice jumper. It's all good.
Does he even live in it? Does he actually live in it?
On his wealth. Yeah, he does now.
I don't need the apartment. So
he's about to say he lives in it now because he sold his apartment and made $500,000 tax free because his government just changed the bright line laws that enabled him to do that. So
exactly.
This is him talking on his wealth.
I don't need the apartment, so I'm selling it. So that's what John Key did when he became Prime Minister.
And
sold his
how do you
apartment.
feel about the fact that it was all over the TV news last night? Have Mitchell
Well,
May?
I've come to expect that. which is
it a bit weird?
I can't. I mean, the bottom line, as I said right from the beginning of my first day in politics, I'm a kid whose parents left school at 16. I went to university, did well in the world, successful, get it, right? And I've chosen to come to politics because I want to add back to New Zealand. So that's my reason for it. But if we're going to criticise people for being successful, and let's be clear, I'm wealthy, I'm sorted.
Yes. I
If
wonder
he wants
how
to give back, he would do it differently. I don't know.
I wonder how his PR team felt about him saying that, and do they all do that face slap thing?
Yeah, they're all just like, not great, not great.
So come on, whānau. Mountain Tui needs some support. Already gone up by about 100 subscribers. I reckon right now there's 715 people watching. We can go to Mountain Tui. We should be able to get that to 500 subscribers with this off this video, whether it's you guys watching live or if you're watching on demand later on. Go and sub to Mountain Tui and make sure you tell them that BHN sent you over there. Yeah, so good roundup, good wrap up. I think Mountain Tui does some writing and stuff for maybe Spin-Off as well, I think, if they're the same person. But yeah, good site, well worth supporting. Nice. What else are we talking about tonight? I'm just having a look at my stories. What haven't we done? Oh, I know what we haven't done. We haven't done old mate talking about transgender. Transgender people playing in the sports ball, as Chewy would say. So this feels to me like a bit of a non-story. In fact, I even think in this conversation, the Bush. We've got music playing from somewhere. Hang on, that's probably playing from Mountain Tui, which is still open. There it is. Yeah, it's gone. The Bush even admits in this conversation around transgender rules in sport at the community level, he's like, I didn't really pay too much attention to this before I became the sports minister. You misspeak here a little bit. I didn't really pay too much attention to this until Winston Peters' lunatic supporters that got him back into government forced you to, talk about the Winky police and also people wanting to play softball in the weekends at their local town. But let's have a look. It's only a 2-minute clip. This is from this morning's breakfast talking about the rules that they're going to bring in. They haven't actually said what they are, but whatever. It seems to be talking about looking after all of our money, every single dollar. There seems to be an incredible waste of resource when it comes to political time, what they're doing. But let's have a look.
And Chris, you've asked Sport New Zealand to have a look at the guideline principles for the inclusion of transgender people in community and sport. Why? What's wrong with it?
My view was that the guidelines are good as far as they go, that they talk a lot about diversity, equity and inclusion. That's really important, but they should also...
Bishop hasn't heard he hasn't got the memo that if you sit on the right, you're not supposed to be supportive of diversity and inclusion. That's it.
At least he said
equity. Yeah, but DEI is bad. DEI is bad, Bishop. He hasn't got it.
They go, that they talk a lot about diversity, equity and inclusion. That's really important, but they should also talk about fairness and safety. And I heard quite a lot of community feedback over the last 6 months or so that I've been looking at this issue quite closely, that the guidelines need to reflect what competitive sport is all about, even at a community level, which is fairness and safety as well.
But it also says there's a whole section in here on wellbeing and safety. So I'm not really sure what you want reviewed. But also, can I just ask, this was part of National's coalition agreement with New Zealand First. Would you have pursued it otherwise?
Well, to be honest, it's not an issue that I thought deeply about until I came into the sport and recreation portfolio. It is a part of our coalition agreement with New Zealand First, obviously. But I think this is the right thing to do. It's just about rebalancing the principles a bit. It's not about...
I mean, he's a consummate politician, but I think no one's told him you can't say this is a load of shit, but it's important to do in the same sentence. You can't say those two things back to back. Then people kind of tilt their head. Like my dog, when I tell him we're going, I can't say the word because she's down there now. When we go into the big square bit of grass where the circular thing gets thrown on, she does that. She goes like that. It's just the head tilt. It's like when you say this is a load of shit, but it's really important, we all tilt our heads, Bish, and go, what? Hang on, what? What are you talking about? We'll just get to the end of this because Ginny wraps it up pretty well.
getting rid of them. And by the way, they're not mandatory. They're just guidelines.
No, that's right.
They're just
Yeah.
there to try and help sport, because sports are grappling with this very tricky issue about how you make sure that community sport is as welcoming to transgender people as possible, but also realise that the participation of transgender people in community sport does present tricky issues for sport.
Does it really though? Because I don't hear too many things about the local village cricket team having too many. I don't see headlines. Is it really that tricky? I mean, we don't get too many news bulletins talking about, local rural soccer team now under threat because someone who's transgender wants to play. Is it really? Do we really need to be doing this? And I guess that's pretty much what Ginny says in about 10 words or less.
And it's just about how we navigate that and grapple with it. And I've asked them to update the guidelines, and I'm sure they will.
Really sorry, I do have to go. Ginny, I'll just give you the last say on that.
The truth is it's a coalition agreement because Winston Peters from New Zealand First wanted to exclude transgender people from community level sport, and that is unfair. Those guidelines were put in place to provide a framework for everybody to participate in local sport, and this is simply a coalition promise to tick the box for Winston Peters, and sadly I don't even think it's going to satisfy him.
Ginny Anderson, Chris Bishop, as always.
I think
my
Ginny
favourite
Anderson
thing
nailed
is
it.
watching Bishop just trying not to nod when he agrees with what she's saying. He's like, this is something that Winston Peters want, and you can just see him going,
yep. And I have to sit here and take this frickin' unfriendly fire. Thanks.
I think he's
Winston.
given us a little nod to say, yeah, this is bullshit. This is bullshit.
And look, there's a conversation to be had at certain levels, for real. I mean, there is a conversation to be had, but community sport, like this, I always think about it like this, Emily. Like one of my girls didn't do this, but my middle girl, she wanted before we left Auckland, she wanted to play rugby. She never ended up doing. I'm not sure why, but there wasn't a girls' team, like in the thing. So she was going to play with the boys, and of course, we're sweet as, cool as with that. What's the difference at a community level? What they're basically saying is you wouldn't be allowed to do that. Because girls and boys, boys and girls, transgender women and women, it seems like it's a solution to no problem anywhere, and it is 100%, Winston went down that line of, bathrooms and gender and that because he wanted to get, he doesn't, listen, I used to live in Tauranga. I used to see Winston with his cigars and his whiskey. He doesn't believe in any of this bullshit. Trust me, he doesn't believe in any of it. He used people to get elected, and now they're calling in the favour, and that's all it is.
Yeah.
Any ideas? Any thoughts?
It's a difficult topic at the top. In the competitive space, I think my partner and I have many, many discussions about how you navigate it, because I think we're in the same spot of like, it needs to be fair and all this sort of stuff. But I think I'm not sure if it was you that said it or someone else who said it, but at the community level, it doesn't matter. And actually you benefit them more with the well-being, getting out there, team stuff. Kids, it's great. Who cares? You're pretty equal when you're a child. So what does it matter? Yeah. It really only matters when you start getting into competitive spaces and, I guess, meddling and what would you call it? Pro, I guess, would be the way to go. That's when it probably starts to matter and it's a conversation. But I think most people very, very infrequently get to that point in their career with sport. I mean,
it also kind of goes. What it says is people at their nature are just fucking assholes that want to just harm everybody, and like, do you know, like if there was a transgender woman whose stature was bigger than the average woman, it's also implying that transgender woman is a danger to them. Like I played club cricket after school for 3 or 4 years for Green Lane in Auckland. And it was somewhere between representative and social. It was sort of to a grade, there was competitions, but we had fun. And a guy came out batting once with one arm. And you know what I did? I didn't bowl as fast. It's like, we still played, it was still competitive, but I just took into account the situation in front of me. So it's like, what this kind of fear is basically saying, oh, Pat's going to bounce that guy as fast as he can bowl. It's like, actually, we're human beings, and if we have a potential disproportionate advantage anywhere, we're also just playing community sport. It's social sport. And if you're a guy playing rugby and you were like me, 6'4" and 140 kilos, and you were marking someone who was 5'4" and 60 kilos, I'm not gonna smash you. You know, we're gonna play and I'm gonna grapple, and I just hate what it implies is that everybody is only about the worst case scenario of what that person can be. I just think it's ugly. It's an ugly way to think. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And of course,
just
Bish said DEI, so he's gone woke. Says give you a bit, so you know, there you go.
Yeah.
Ken on the old social says it's going to be a very long 720 days. Thank you for your super chat. Brian says, "Oh well, the kids will get fed at school." Oh wait. And finally, look, there's no pressure here whatsoever. But Gareth has just said, "Great show tonight. Wondering where we can follow Emily on social media."
No.
You know, we put the super chats up. It's one of the super chats. I'm not saying anything. Okay, let's do one more thing, shall we? We've got time because we have no time limits. So we have time, obviously. And this is for if people want to see the dog. The dog creates more of a stir than anything we ever say or do. I understand. And I promised this at the start of the show. Nick, Stray Dog NZ. It's a great Twitter feed. If you're on Twitter, you've got to be following it. Our Prime Minister has no portfolios and yet never seems to have the time to get ahead of what's happening within his government. Here's a thread of the many, and I would say many, times Christopher Luxon has claimed he has been unaware of his coalition government controversies. And the image there, I have absolutely no idea. Number one, Dunedin's mitigated flood risk prevention scheme. Quote, "I haven't seen the advice on that and I'm not aware of that," he said, despite his coalition rejecting the offer earlier that year. Number two, where Casey Costello advice on tobacco policy came from. Quote, "I have not seen the stories. In fairness, I need to be able to have that before I can have any further comment," which is ironic because he said that again the other day. And we were saying, hang on, I've read them, and Chewy's read them, and the public's read them. But even the other day when they'd been released, he still hadn't read them. That was on RNZ on Monday, I think. Number three, 8 months later, Luxon still hasn't seen the advice Costello used to cut excise tax on heated tobacco products by 50%. Look, quote, "Look, I haven't seen that advice." Donations from the tobacco industry. Quote, "Luxon was asked by Hipkins if he would consider any donation from the tobacco industry to New Zealand First a conflict of interest. The Prime Minister responded by saying he wasn't aware of any donations." We're getting a picture here, people. Number five, Winston Peters getting special treatment to avoid cuts to MFAT. Asked if Peters got special treatment through the budget negotiations, the Prime Minister told staff, quote, "Not that I'm aware of, no." Number six, how many households would be worse off from his government's tax bracket changes? Quote, "I haven't seen the data that you're referencing," end quote, the PM said when asked. 9,000 households would be worse off as a result of his income tax bracket changes. Number seven, how much people get on the job seeker benefit that he introduced sanctions for. Quote, "I'll give you a precise number, but I don't know the precise number," end quote. Number eight, Penny Simmons signing off on sudden cuts to respite care for families of disabled people. Quote, "Luxon replied that he was unaware of the changes prior to them being made," end quote. Get the history here, guys. Number nine, Ministry of Education rehiring staff as consultants. Quote, "Consulting firms are now asking some of the MOE staff being made redundant to work for them, essentially doing the same work but at double the price the ministry would have paid." Luxon said, quote, "I'm not aware of that." Number 10, allegations of his mentor and close friend John Key's insider trading. Quote, "It's not something I'm aware of. I'm unaware of what he's been doing on there." Number 11, abuse in state care report. Luxon fronted the media in Ashburton on Friday, where he conceded that he had not yet read the final report of the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in State Care and Faith-Based Care. Number 12, National using AI to generate images for campaign acts. Luxon denied using AI, saying, "No, National isn't using AI to make ads, not that I'm aware of." A National Party spokesperson said, however, "Yes, we have used AI to create some stock images." Number 13, former National Minister child sex abuse allegations. Luxon said he was, quote, "completely unaware," end quote, of the, quote, "very serious allegations," end quote. Number 14, current National MP Sam Uffindale's history of assault. Quote, what emerged last night was a new series of allegations that I was completely unaware of. Number 15, National MP Barbara Kruger's meeting with Agricultural Minister Luxon. He was not aware MP Barbara Kruger had met with Agriculture Minister Damien O'Connor as part of her son's dispute with MPI. I'm getting a sweat up here. Number 16, who his then likely coalition partner Winston Peters was. This was so funny. Quote, I don't know him. I don't know him. I don't know him, Paddy. I don't know him well. That was glorious. In fact, I think we've got the audio here.
I remember that. It was so good.
It was
I don't know him, Paddy. Leave me alone.
Just so I can rest my voice.
A question about Winston Peters, and it has to be yes or no. Is he good or bad for this country, Chris Hipkins?
Bad. That's a decision for the voters of New Zealand.
Yes or no? Is he good or bad?
I don't know him.
Is he good or bad?
I don't know him, and I don't want to deal with him if I have to, but I have to keep Chris out.
Is he good or bad? Yes or no? Because you said you will deal with him if you had to.
I don't know him, Paddy. I don't know him well.
Everybody knows him. It's Winston Peters.
How many more have we got to go? Oh my God.
I mean, he's not a politician. He wouldn't know. I mean, he was CEO. He's in
20.
business. He doesn't know anything about politics. He doesn't know Winston. No one knows.
And number
Winston.
17, how much he made in tax-free capital gains from his investment properties. I have no idea, he told Newsub when asked on how much capital gains he made in total from those 7 properties in the last year. 18, Air New Zealand's contact with the Saudi Navy. Former Air New Zealand CEO Christopher Luxon said he has, quote, no recollection, end quote, of the company's controversial contract with the Saudi military, despite being the boss at the time. Oh, come on, that's the worst fucking one of all. That is the worst of all. Number 19, I think there's only 20 people, so stick with me. How many pension payments are, or that public transport is subsidised? How much pension payments are, or that public transport is subsidised? Public transport can't be subsidised or underwritten, Luxon claims. And I think it's the last one. Oh, thank the good Lord, I think. Yep. Number 20, specific details about his policy. Not only does Luxon repeat the phrase, I'm unaware, quote unquote, or I've not been briefed, or I've not been advised ad nauseum, he regularly gets details wrong. When challenged on one of these errors, Luxon said, whoop-de-woo indeed. Really? There you go. Again, I know we were talking about Mountain Tui tonight, but if you're not following Stray Dog NZ on Twitter, you should go and do that now if you're watching us on Twitter. And you can just tell them BHN send you. Should I go look at Mountain Tui? I wonder what they're up to. Hey, it's been a nice show, Emily. Is there anything in the? We should just get these out of the way first of all, because we want to thank people. Thank you, Ella. Out of sight, out of mind. Luxon probably. And Peter says Luxon equals Sergeant Schultz. Oh my gosh, that's such a good reference. You probably have no idea what that means, do you, Emily?
No.
Sergeant Schultz. It was a program before my time as well. But you know, when you're a kid, you watch repeats from the past 20 years. So it was on the 20 years before I was a kid, and it was it was called Hogan's Heroes, and they were in a German prisoner of war camp, but it was a comedy, and they like kind of got in and got out as much as they wanted. And one of the guys who guarded them was called Sergeant Schultz, and go, I know nothing. So yes, that's actually quite good. I can see a t-shirt coming on there. Before we go, a little bit of whānau housekeeping. So people are aware that I'm wearing our merch today. People are aware that the printer that we've been using has unfortunately and sadly gone out of business. We are in the process of potentially negotiating buying our printers' gear off them to be able to do BHN merch in-house. Now, I like to share this stuff with you guys to let you know what's going on, because I've had a few messages saying it's been a while since a merch drop. It has. And especially Emily, some of the designs you've been doing recently as well, which we're all very excited about. But I just thought I'd mention to you, it's a potentially significant outlay if we were to do it. And if we do, though, come up with a good idea tonight, we can print merch tomorrow, which would be kind of cool.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I'm in Auckland over the weekend. We're going to make a decision, me and my partner, because ultimately we have to underwrite anything because of, financially we're the podcast at, which is fine. But I thought we'd let you know what's going on, and as a way of also saying, stay tuned about the merch. It could be back again soon. We'll see how it goes. We have to learn a whole new system and do it ourselves, which would be hilarious. Because the other thing is, I've got so much spare time at the moment, I could just do with another job because I've got lots of things going on. So yeah, that's something that's going on in the BHN whānau, just to let you all about. One more super chat here. We'll just do this and then we can wrap, I think. I am hope qualified counsellors save lives in our province and fills a huge gap for young people. Last few years, MH clinician cuts, CAF's team cuts, funding to GB Friday, not ideal, but it saves lives. Yeah, well, that's why last night we were very clear to say we didn't want to talk them down. I don't know too much about them, but that was what we did. Anything you want to wrap up with, Emily? Anything you want to?
I had a brain storm. I'm going to say brain fart. The opposite of a brain fart.
What would the opposite of a fart be?
Just want to put this out, my little conspiracy out into the world very quickly.
Always.
The little leak about nurses, the hospitals or whatever it was told not to freeze hiring, so they freeze hiring on nurses. Do you think
it's worse than that though, because they offered some jobs
worse.
and then they recanted them. Yeah. But see, yep, with you.
Do you think perhaps with the whole idea of going private over public, do you think that they're training a bunch of nurses who are going to be then pinched by the private sector? And then they might bolster the private sector and continue to give them the, overflow and start to bolster the private sector even more.
Yeah.
They'll have the nurses to do it.
Interesting.
I don't know. Conspiracy theories, I wouldn't take it very far, but just thought I'd put that into the world. You can think what you want.
All right, team.
Secondly, I also shared my screen, and then you can see where I am on socials.
Do I have to put it up, or can you put it up?
I think you have to do it.
All right. Well, that's why you need to have that admin that I sent you an invite for today, and then you do it yourself.
So I do exist online. Instagram, I am pretty awesome with an _. Twitch, I stream every now and then, Pretty Awesome Gaming, and then I'm also on YouTube under the same name. So if you find me, follow me, good luck, have fun.
Nice. And all that artwork you've done yourself?
Yeah, it's just stuff that I do when I'm bored, basically.
Very clever.
Yeah.
Very clever.
So you go.
So
I do exist online.
Do it again and do it a bit slower. So Pretty Awesome Gaming?
Gaming at Pretty Awesome Gaming on YouTube. Same on Twitch. Doing lots of Minecraft at the moment.
Cool.
And then,
my kids will be into that. They're trying to get me into Minecraft. I'm still on Fortnite. I'm a little bit 2000 and late.
And Instagram is I am pretty awesome with an _. So yeah, you can find all the random.
You watch Kiwi Skirt find those quick, smart, and put them up for everyone else to see.
Yeah, they will.
All right, guys. It's been a great week actually, and thank Craig for coming on tonight. He's a legendary man, and we're very glad that he's involved with us. Other than that, if you're keep an eye out for a Wookiee around Christchurch, they'll be out there doing things, and keep an eye out for I don't know how to describe myself, Wookiee's friend around Auckland this weekend. We'll catch up with you then. And think of the dog being left by herself. She'll probably die of she misses us if we're gone. Honestly, sometimes I bring the dog home in the car, right? And my partner goes upstairs through the upstairs door and the dog follows her. And I park in the garage and then I go upstairs through the inside door, and she meets me at the top of the stairs like I've been out for the whole afternoon. And like we've literally just got out of the car at the same time. Madness. So she's got to survive for the weekend with the 18-year-old looking after her, the two gingers. All right. We'll see you on Monday night live from 9 p.m. And I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing that. There we go. Because we've got to do the outro song, and then we get to say goodbye over the music. I've got it. I'm back in the room now.
Help us settle a debate, whether it be thoughtful or funny, even if we're all creatures of hate. It's a fine line that we're walking together. For better, push aside the temptation to berate. Let's take a note of the corners we stand in. As many points as the hairs on my chinny chin chin. When the news that we're watching is hairy, knowing all the things that we need to be wary of. Like the rich have their hand out for rewards, while the many have to work at what they can't afford. And the rest of us ain't paying attention, or maybe have
All right, team. It is indeed big hairy news. We're done for another week. It's been fun. Thanks to Craig Renney for being on board. Thanks for jumping in tonight, Emily. It was great fun. Enjoying this a lot.
Yeah.
And thank you guys for watching and listening. Remember, hashtag share our shit. There'll be a bunch of clips and stuff going out over the weekend. Feel free to share them around. If you want to be a part of what we do, patreon.com/big hairy news. Other than that, I'm sort of done, so I'll say goodbye. You got anything you want to leave us with, Emily?
No, have a fantastic Friday, have a fantastic Saturday and Sunday, and stay safe with the weather.
All right, Tim. Catch you when we catch you. Hooroo!